A humanitarian disaster threatening to spiral out of control. A shaky ceasefire as Tutsi-led rebels tighten their grip on eastern Congo. Why has this crisis erupted now? And how much of it is fueled by ethnic tensions and the battle to control the country's natural resources? This is Inside Story. Hello. Up to 1 million people have been displaced by years of conflict. Now, the latest outbreak of violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo is threatening to escalate an already disastrous humanitarian situation. Clashes between the government troops and rebels started almost 2 months ago. Last Wednesday, rebel leader General Nkunda declared a ceasefire, but not before he advanced to within 15 kilometers of the eastern Congo city of Goma. The Congolese government accuses neighbouring Rwanda of backing the rebels, but Nkunda says he's protecting the region's Tutsis from attacks by Hutu militias. Congo plays host to the world's largest UN peacekeeping mission, but many Congolese have accused the UN of not doing enough to help the civilians. Now, international efforts are underway to end the crisis. European foreign ministers have visited the region, and both the Rwandan and the Congolese presidents have agreed to attend an emergency summit sponsored by the United Nations and the African Union. Well, joining us now are our guests. In New York, Bruno Lukabu, head of Congo Sans Frontières, which aims to promote Congolese solidarity. In Washington, D.C., Delphina Schrank from the Washington Post and fellow of the International Reporting Project, who's just returned from DR Congo. And in London, William Gumede, author and fellow at Witwatersrand University in South Africa. Welcome to all three of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's start by taking a look at the most recent violence. Delphina, I know that you've just come back from DR Congo. I mean, from what you've seen there, why has Nkunda launched his offensive now? Is there a threat towards the Tutsis from Hutu militias?
That's a good question. He is fighting in the name of protecting the Congolese Tutsis. It's not very clear that there is that kind of threat. What is true is that there's a Hutu militia that is dispersed around the forests of eastern Congo, which is a remnant of the Hutu genocidaire force that massacred Hutus in Rwanda in 1994. And that seems to be what he claims to be fighting against, or at least protecting the Congolese Tutsis from. In terms of why he's fighting now, there has been I got back 2 weeks ago, and in the past 2 months, there has been ongoing fighting between his forces and the Congolese forces as a result of a breakdown of a ceasefire and a number of ceasefire violations. It's not very clear why he began now to launch another offensive.
But what is clear is that many people are caught in the middle here between the rebels and the Congolese army. I mean, from what you could see, this is clearly a humanitarian crisis which is growing ever bigger by the day.
It's the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world in terms of sheer numbers. You've got over 1 million people who are living in displacement camps or are displaced multiple times and living in the households of acquaintances that are already overburdened with people from past displacements. It's a very, very serious situation, and it continues virtually every day because fighting happens sporadically between different hills around the city of Goma, the provincial capital of North Kivu. And the result of that is that villagers caught in between these hills are immediately disappearing at the first sound of gunfire. So they're moving constantly. They might move. I met a woman who was living out of a schoolroom when the school was in session, she would move to a eucalyptus tree. And this was about a week before rebel forces moved in on that city. Now, I don't know where she is. Chances are that she's disappeared into this moving mass that's either gone up towards Uganda or tried to head down to Goma for protection. And it's not clear that they are getting protected at all. Humanitarian agencies cannot get to these people because of the ongoing security situation. People are starving. There's been rioting lately when one humanitarian agency managed to access one of these camps. So it's absolutely a very, very critical, very serious situation.
OK, William, if I can come to you. I mean, how much blame for this can be laid at President Kabila's door? He promised to repatriate Hutus, he promised to disarm them. That hasn't been done.
I mean, it's been very, very difficult, since the elections in 2006. I mean, to keep the country's integrity together. I mean, this is a vast country we're talking about. All of Europe is Congo. That's the size that we're talking about. So that inherently, it's very difficult to manage such a country. That's the first thing. And the second thing is also there's sporadic fighting, since the elections, and even since the last, the peace was restored from the last civil war in 2003, has been going on, along the sides. But I think what has happened now is what Joseph Kabila has been unable to do. I think he's been unable to govern inclusively. When you have these kind of civil wars and you start rebuilding a new country, what you need to do is you have to try to get as many as possible of the belligerents, as part, of this new nation,
and
get
the
them involved
DRC
in
is one of the
governing
most
and so on.
ethnically diverse countries on the African continent, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, what you need to do is, or what Kabila needed to do is, he was, from the beginning, he needed to be much more inclusive. He hasn't been that. And, then there's also the other element that, a lot of his own inner circle are benefiting or are being perceived to be benefiting, in this situation, or economically benefiting. And, large groups of people feel they are not benefiting, from government services and so on. And they, and what they do then is they then interpret it as it is because they're from the wrong ethnicity. And that is, I think, this is one element that's being used now by the rebels to mobilize, sadly, on a very cynical element for their own, to soar up their own political basis here.
OK, Bruno, let's talk about Rwanda's role in all this. Rwanda obviously denies that it is influencing this in any way. What do you think? How much of an agenda does Rwanda have here?
Rwanda has an agenda. This thing didn't start yesterday. It has been going on since 1990s when Mobutu, the dictator from Zaire, was deposed by Kabila's father. And Rwanda was behind Kabila, helped Kabila to seize power and chase Mobutu out of the country. And since then, Rwanda has not left the country, really. They are there. They are on the eastern part of Congo. And right now, Nkunda, the dissident General Nkunda, says that he is protecting the minority Tutsi.
But is this about ethnic divides, or is this about DR Congo's huge mineral resources?
I think there are many other reasons behind the Nkunda movement in Congo. He is saying that he is protecting the Tutsi. We believe that he has other reason for invading that part of the country.
OK, William, I know this is something that you have written on in the past about how the demand for Congo's mineral resources, its gold, its diamonds, its cobalt, its coltan, is actually helping to fuel this conflict.
Absolutely. I mean, this latest explosion of the violence and this conflict now is also partially because of because of economics. I mean, if you look at the Congo, the last couple of months, they've been in Africa one of the countries that suffered, the worst from food inflation, food shortages, and so on. Now you have the global financial crisis, which is affecting African countries, at a huge level, and the Congo is also, it's affecting the Congo also. So what's happening now is that in the neighboring countries like Rwanda, Zimbabwe and Angola were also in the past been part of, a link to the civil war in the Congo. I think it's now getting tough in terms of, economically. And so what I want to get, especially Rwanda, want now much more, wants something economically out of the eastern part of Congo, want to get access to minerals, want to get access, to those kind of resources. And I think that is clearly a very, very big factor, especially if you think about, economically, the next few, in the medium term, is going to be a very, very tough time for African countries.
Delphina, what do you think? What do people there say about what's behind this conflict?
I think the mineral trade is certainly one huge element. It's certainly not the only element, but I saw big evidence of this. But I saw it from the perspective of the Congolese army, who were busy profiting, or at least officers of the Congolese army and renegade brigades of the Congolese army who were profiting massively from the natural resources in North Kivu, in this province that is ridden by war. And that I walked, for instance, 2 days to a tin mine, the biggest tin mine in North Kivu, smack in the middle of this province. It's completely controlled by a renegade military brigade, the 85th Brigade, and other uniformed individuals. It's run like a mafia, effectively. Every mine shaft on this mountain is owned by, whether it's not an officer of the 85th Brigade, it's an officer of some other part of the military, or a politician, a provincial politician, or some businessman who's protected by a politician. And in fact, legally, this mine belongs, or the concessions, the exploratory concessions, belong to a foreign company. So, I mean, that's one example.
Over that? Is there resentment over foreign countries coming in and taking a stake in DR Congo's mineral resources?
Well, in North Kivu, there are very few, in this particular war-scarred region, there are very few foreign companies, precisely because of the ongoing insecurity, which doesn't mean that it's not rich and has huge potential. It absolutely does. Most foreign companies are down in the region of Katanga, which has been quite peaceful in recent times. It wasn't in the past. So there isn't, as far as I could tell, and actually there's a huge effort in North Kivu, speaking to the business community there has been a huge effort to clean up the mineral trade. They were well aware that there lies the potential of their country, and they have made a huge steps forward. But there's very little they can do in a region that has terrible, terrible infrastructure. As I said, I walked 2 days to get to this mine, but what I was told, for instance, by the provincial minister of mines there is that's their biggest problem. They can't clear out these places of all these predatory militias or of predatory military brigades because of the lack of infrastructure. Okay,
we'll continue this discussion after the break. When we come back, what solutions are there for the Democratic Republic of Congo, and how much international commitment is there to ending the conflict? Stay with us.